direct my question to Mark. So this is the issue of cost. In the United States, the company marketing this first product has said it will be 2.5 times as expensive per unit. And they're expecting perhaps less units consumed. Expecting. So what do you think will be the uptake in the United States? Will insurers pay?
In the U.S., I think there is an expectation that the payers will support the price as it's been presented by the companies. But I'm not sure that the price calculations in terms of how they've estimated what would be a parity price actually are going to reflect real world utilization. One of the biggest issues that or one of the biggest opportunities, I guess I should say, with the new drugs really is that we're moving from that era of treating the disease to treating the patient individually. And what's going to happen is matching an individual patient's preferences and values, the activity levels that they want to pursue in their life to achieve a more normal life with their drug regimen. I think the concern will come is the new long-lasting drugs have a very long tail where patients will sit at a very low factor level. And whether or not in the very active patient and when we move into the general population, that creates risk for patients to have the level of activity that they want, and the patients are going to need to move to more frequent dosing than once a week or once every 10 days to get those same benefits.
So what you're saying is with the doses as recommended after these clinical trials, at 2.5 times the price, but at 2.5 times less use, it's actually not a progress in treatment. It might even be a step backwards in treatment. What do you think of that?
Well,
there's no evidence that was shown in the clinical trials.
No, you couldn't put that in the clinical trials.
So that comes under the category of potential.
My take on it is I'm hoping that, in fact, the US and the Canadas will be the experimental markets. And when they move out of those markets into markets where I live, for example, the pricing strategy may well change from parity to differential pricing. And then we can get the benefit. That's what I'm hoping. And obviously, let's just wait and see at this stage.
So I want to add something to the part about the power of the hemophilia community. It is at 2.5 times parity now, benefits compared to the new long-acting extended half-life products. But remember back when Advate was introduced, that had a high premium, and the community rebuilt. And very quickly, the price came down. So there's a lot of power in the community to influence if you think that pricing is too high, or if you're concerned that your friends won't be able to have access to the product, have a voice.
Mind you, Jerry, if you just say that one of the things we expected to happen when and if these come on the market is that the price of the current recombinants will go down. That's already in fact starting to happen in several countries, including in the country we're sitting in at the moment, Australia. So under tenders at the moment, the prices are going down, which means when the companies are coming along saying it's parity, we'll offer the longer acting at total, the total average annual cost per patient might be the same as what? It's going to be different price in each country. And at the moment, the competition are already responding before these are even on the market by lowering their prices.
The drugs and the drug trials, because there really isn't an alternative model for drug approval, were built on a 1950s standard of treatment, which is a trough level of 1%. What I would hope as a patient that as we now move into 2010 and beyond, that the standard of treatment in the 1950s could actually advance. So when we talk about leading a normal quality of life for patients, normal really has historically been defined as a normal life expectancy. And what we really want to achieve is to allow these products to advance so that patients have the full opportunity without having to think about their treatment in relation to their family life, their physical activity, and their work and their career life, and not make decisions based on their hemophilia. And so my concern is that if you have a long period at a very low trough level, you're going to be forced to make decisions that you haven't been facing now. If payers are expecting parity pricing with that low trough level, either the patients are going to have to adjust their life or the price is going to go up. So I absolutely agree with you. There is going to have to be a reckoning between the improvements that we're seeking and the pricing at some point if we really are going to use these to advance care and not just reduce the frequency of having to infuse.
How do you think these products will be greeted at that price outside the U.S., where you have a reimbursement agency making decisions?
Well, I can tell you that, I mean, the US is an interesting market because you have an average wholesale price, and I'm not sure anybody actually pays that full price, and you've got a huge diversity of mixture systems. In Europe, you're going to have, when these products come on the market, they're going to be subject to health technology assessments, either in individual countries or centrally through the EU HTA network. They'll be subject to national tenders in many of the countries. And I'm convinced that most European governments will not pay more for what they see as convenience. So first of all, I want to see the companies drop that word convenience. Less frequent infusion isn't just convenience. You're protecting and preserving veins. But the word convenience, if we go to our health ministry and say, we want these products because they're more convenient, very nice, but we're not paying more. So I think we need to get beyond that convenience part. And I think that what I'd like to see, and I echo what Mark said, what I'd like to see is, we've talked to the companies about possibly making these products available at the same average annual cost per patient with severe hemophilia. But I'd like to see that to a trough level of 3%, not 1%.
So the paradigm shift here has to be in Europe, not in the community. The community has already gotten well beyond the 1950s model of 1% or just a few bleeds. There are very few pediatricians now who tell children, don't go play sports, don't play soccer. They even have pediatricians allowing people to play hockey, and that requires higher levels of factor. I think the paradigm shift is going to happen in Europe. Cell phones aren't made in Europe. Computers aren't made in Europe. And they're going to have to change their way of thinking to allow new and innovation. And the hemophilia community is going to have to appreciate that. And the hemophilia community is going to have to be the advocate to tell the regulatory and the government that they can't live the way they've done for 30 years. It will hurt the community and it will hurt the future of hemophilia. These products have to be introduced and they have to be strongly advocated for.
Just let me answer a question here, but I'm not sure I agree, Joy, because in fact the Marilyn Manco-Johnson study, the joint outcome study, would have been seen as unethical in Europe because you would not have people randomized into on-demand versus prophylaxis. In most European countries, prophylaxis was the standard of care for all children with severe hemophilia well before that came into the States. So I think what you have in Europe is a very centralized system. You have the EU procurement rules, you have the marketing authorization in Europe. The real threat in Europe, frankly, is the threat of market exclusivity, that there is a real possibility that only the first 8 and the first 9 will be licensed. If that's the case, it'll be a disaster because then there'll be no competition and there'll be much higher prices.
Competition is key.
Absolutely.
I'm going to switch gears here because we have limited time. And this is a community that has lived through a number of tragedies. With new products, the products in the 1970s and 80s, this is the first real change in products in 40 years in terms of how they work. And they have only been, tested on a very small number of people. So they're brand new. Well, 150, per product, that's a very small trial.
Look, I mean, they've been shown in the context of clinical trials to be safe. And I think my only concern is one has to keep the eye on the ball, that they remain safe. So I would like to see phase 4 studies and other surveillance mechanisms that make sure that we're not missing things that might just pop up in the general population that we did not pick up in the studies. I mean, there are studies that some of us have been involved in where you've gone through the usual sort of straight path and you think you're dealing with a drug that is completely safe and suddenly out of nowhere something pop up. So I would like to see that continuation. In other words, it should not be the end. And I think UHAS in Europe is a nice model of taking that process forward.
So safety is one thing, but efficacy is the other side of the equation. So Dr. Iorio, as an epidemiologist and a hematologist, are you comfortable with how far we've come with the clinical trials?
So I'm comfortable in expanding the number of patients treated because I think that even if 400 patients overall is not a large population, is a large enough population to be confident that commonly seen side effect will not be there, but still we have very little information on long-term side effects that might not be there. There is no reason to expect, but you cannot rule out until you get there. We are moving, you said very correctly, we are moving to a different way of treating. We are moving to a different generation of product. Well, they are really different, and we never thought about drug interaction, for example. We never thought of binding to plasma protein. And with heparins, it took thousands of patients to discover that there were specific patients that might have a different reaction. So I think that we are safe to go, but we need to keep an eye. For example, I'm not treating PIDs, but we are not worried of long-term accumulation of anything, but something is what you see in a small population, something is what you will be confident after seeing many more followed for longer. And if I can go back to the observation of Jerry on Europe, I would say that maybe Europe have to change gear, but actually if you look at unit per capita, is already on average 50% more than is used in the States. So maybe they have to shift gear, but it might be not. So there are areas where you use the standard protocol from the 50. In many other places, there is a largely generous use of the current concentrate. Very likely the way the reimbursement is managed is less strict. So you'll do it on a population base, end of the year, on many more patients. And I don't know what will be in Ireland, but for sure, the place where I was in the south of Europe is very likely that you'll have a good chance of trying, for example, higher TRAF. I agree. We have to see what happens when patient will be active in real life at low level. We are confident from the studies nothing is happening, but in any kind of new drug put on the market, you can't be sure until you have a significant number of patients studied.
So I think that I'd like to take a 1, 2, 3 step in this. Safe enough is what I'm advocating to move forward. And all of the patients on the clinical trials have said, these drugs are a major step forward, I'm not going back. Safe enough means take these. But you asked, are these wonder drugs? I think it's very important for the community to say that these are wonder drugs, to be very enthusiastic, adopt them quickly. The reason is that we now have 17 options in preclinical studies. The reason we have 17 options is the profit that the pharmaceutical companies see in hemophilia. If we restricted that profit, we would not have any future. So the hemophilia community has to say, safe enough, I'm enthusiastically moving forward in the developed world. That will force all of the other older products to move out into the people who have no access to factor now. And the hemophilia community has to say, what is a better drug than the current extended half-life products now? Tell the pharmaceutical company scientists to make those drugs and move forward enthusiastically and quickly. If we wait until something is zero risk, we'll be doing the same thing for 20 years that we're doing now.
I think in many European countries, the current cost of treatment for the average patient with severe haemophilia per year is somewhere between €100,000 and €250,000. And I agree with what you say, Joy, these are very exciting drugs, but governments will not significantly increase that budget, no matter how good these drugs are. They would say, okay, we're sympathetic, these look nice convenience, but the fact is we can't increase the budget. So I think the companies have to come in with prices that are realistic, high volume, low margin, prices that are realistic. That in turn will force down the price of the current recombinant products, which will then go into new markets in Europe. When we talk about Europe, you've got a variation between 0.1 IU per capita in Armenia and 8.6 in Sweden. So these will not, the longer acting drugs will never be available in Armenia, but there might be some chance of them getting plasma derived or current recombinant if the prices go low enough.
So 2 years ago, Mark, when you were president of the WFH and giving your final plenary, you challenged the companies to adopt a new paradigm, which was based on high volume, low cost, as opposed to today's low volume, high cost. And we had many conversations with the companies about this. And this is the first new product to come along since then. And look what they're doing. The price is higher than ever before. So do you see that new paradigm coming to pass?
I still hold hope that the ultimate price, as the market settles out, will be more reasonable. We've not yet seen embracing the volume approach to pricing like a lot of other drugs have. I think there is a significant profit margin in the drugs. I think as technology advances, even though there's huge development costs, they get cheaper and cheaper and more efficient to produce. And we should continue to push on that. The only way we're going to solve the problem of the world so that everybody has the same access is to bring down the price. And one of the greatest ways to bring down the price is to increase the markets and to expand the number of patients that are purchasing this price. So it's logical to me that shifting to a volume-based business is our solution, and that will help all of us. I think we can hold hope that that will happen because there are a whole series of existing drugs in the market today, and they're going to have to react to the new drugs. So if there's significant market share, if there's significant uptake, the older generations are going to start coming down, and that's going to pull the price of the other new drugs down. So I think the next 6 months, 2 years are going to be very interesting to watch how they play out. But parity, I agree with Brian. The parity pricing, I think that argument does break down when we get into the real world application. So
I think that what you say is absolutely correct, and I like the analogy of iPhones. An iPhone costs $691, costs $127 to make. That profit margin is higher than what we have currently in factory production. But Advate is pennies to produce. So if we get competition and nobody wants Advate, Baxter's not going to give up Advate. They're going to go to the place where they can sell it for 11 cents a unit. And where is that? All the people who have no access to factor now. So I don't think volume-based pricing is the way to go. I think competition is the way to go, and the companies will figure out how to make it happen. Just like I suspect that within the next few months we're going to have a $35 smartphone because of the competition between Samsung and Apple.
But for what's the reason why you expect that Advate will go at 0.11 somewhere else and not here?
Because they're not going to have a market here when the extended half-life products take the market.
Dr. Malangu, how do you see these things evolving in on your continent, in Africa, where there's very little access?
I mean, my take on it, and I agree, it has to be volume driven, but the reality is we haven't got millions and millions of people with hemophilia in the world. So realistically, it is not going to happen. And I think the approach of competition is probably the most plausible route. If you take, for example, my country, where, for example, HIV drugs were inaccessible. And as soon as the volumes became apparent, we became the cheapest in the world. And that's purely volume. And there wasn't a lot of competition, but the pharmaceutical industry could see the volumes and the recovery out of the volumes. So we need to start to be more realistic about the approach. I mean, they have invested a lot of money. I mean, let's face it, it's a lot of money to take a drug from the preclinical stage to the end of the clinical phase. So to expect them to basically give it away for free, it's unrealistic. So the way I see it is we need to introduce more competitors in the market. And in that way, the competitors will actually bring the price down. For various reasons. I think Jerry alluded to one of them, is that there will be different drugs. And because they're different, they will access different markets. And in that way, in fact, they'll start realizing that certain markets actually need special treatment. And that's the way I see it going.
I see a bit of goodness, but also a bit of unrealistic view on what's really happening. Because if you look at where some of the currently available molecule cost less, is not in the low income countries. Yep. Actually, is in the high income countries that were able to set up tendering system, and it happens that the same molecule cost 1/3 there and cost much more in low income countries. So I wouldn't be confident in saying that just because you have better molecules in the high income countries, you might expect the other being sold for less, benefiting. This is something that might work as a business model, and is joining the value for something new and more, I wouldn't say convenient, but more appealing, and the high volume market that Mark was proposing. But it's not something that will happen just because is in the nature of fact. There will be need of driving that way. So, for example, you might imagine you create mechanism where in a while, when you have the same company having different generation of molecules, you might get differential in different areas, but I don't see that happening soon.
The companies aren't just going to drop the price overnight because they want to sell more volume. The investors, the people that have put the money behind the companies, have a certain expectation on a return on investment. So when I laid out the concept in Paris in 2012, there really is a strong linkage between trough levels and the opportunity to actually improve the profile of care for hemophilia and volumes, and the two probably have to go hand in hand. It's multiple paradigm shifts moving at the same time, and the companies end up being held harmless by an expanded marketplace, and at the same time the patients then have the opportunity to have more freedom and more protection at a baseline level with the new extended life products. So it requires several systems working together, which is very difficult to move everybody at once. I think the natural experiment that will occur within the U.S. probably will allow some of that to happen because of the incubator of innovation, and maybe by the time the products move to other continents and into Europe as well, some of that will have sorted out. Trough levels are going to float up naturally in the U.S., and at some point there's going to be price competition to bring it down.